Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're getting into the weeds a bit, looking way under the hood at how your computer actually starts up.
Yeah, from the moment you hit power to, seeing your desktop.
Exactly. We'll touch on those first instructions, the firmware like UEFI, CMOS memory, and even those, well, slightly controversial bits like Intel's ME and AMD's PSP.
Right. The goal is to sort of demystify this whole startup sequence, figure out what matters for you without needing an engineering degree.
So the boot process, I love the bootstraps analogy.
It's a good one. The computer literally has to pull itself up from nothing. It needs some basic instructions stored somewhere, permanent, non-volatile memory.
And those instructions kick off a boot program.
Which then calls the bootloader. The bootloader's job is basically finding your operating system, Windows, Linux, Mac OS on the drive, and loading it into RAM.
That's where you might see menus like GRB or the Windows one if you have multiple OCs, right?
Precisely. And it's flexible. It can boot from your hard drive, a USB stick, even over the network sometimes.
And things like MBR and GPT, they're like the address book for finding that OS.
Sort of, yeah. They're data structures on the disk that tell the bootloader where to look. GPT is the modern one, handles much bigger drives than the old MBR.
Okay, so that leads us to firmware, the bridge between hardware and software.
Right. And the big shift here was from the old BIOS to the modern UEFI standard. It was like a 30-year gap between them.
Wow, 30 years. And UEFI brought some real improvements.
Oh, yeah. Definitely faster boot times, that fast boot feature a lot of systems have. Plus, you get like a nicer graphical setup menu instead of just text.
And better support for big hard drives, over 2.2 terabytes.
Yep, thanks to GPT support. And it works on more types of processors, not just traditional PCs. Network booting is more streamlined, too.
But maybe the biggest deal is security, right? Secure boot.
Absolutely. Secure boot is probably one of the most significant UEFI features. It tries to make sure that everything loaded during startup is digitally signed and hasn't been tampered with by, say, rootkits or other malware.
How does it verify that?
It uses a kind of chain of trust. There's a platform key, PK, key enrollment keys, KEYs, and databases of allowed DB and disallowed DBX signatures. If a component's signature isn't valid or is on the bad list, UEFI can block it from loading.
So it's like a bouncer checking IDs at the door before the OS even wakes up.
That's a good way to put it. The process is roughly initialize hardware, load the boot manager, find the OS boot entry you want, load its bootloader, and then hand over control.
And you get into those settings usually by mashing delete or F2 or something when you first turn it on.
Yeah, Del, F2, sometimes F10 or escape, depends on the manufacturer. And like you said, Intel basically sunsetted BIOS support by 2020, so UEFI is standard now.
Okay, so where do all these settings live when the power is off? That's CMOS traditionally.
Traditionally, yes. CMOS memory, kept alive by a little coin battery on the motherboard. Nowadays, it's often EEPROM or flash memory doing the same job, but people still often call it CMOS settings.
And it holds things like the date, time, boot order, crucial stuff.
Exactly. System configuration, maybe some hardware settings. The UEFI reads this info right at the start to know how to configure things.
And that little battery, the CMOS or a PC battery, keeps it all ticking.
Yep, keeps that memory powered and the system clock running. They last a fair while, maybe 5-7 years on average.
What happens when it dies?
You'll usually see the system clock resetting to a default date time, maybe lose your custom boot order, or get errors during startup saying settings are wrong, but you can reset them if you need to.
Okay, now let's dive even deeper into the CPU itself. These embedded systems, Intel, ME, and AMD PSP, some call them socket backdoors.
Well, that's the controversial term. They are essentially tiny, independent processors living inside your main CPU or chipset with a lot of potential control.
Let's start with Intel's management engine, ME. It's been around since about 2008.
It's an autonomous subsystem, runs its own firmware, its own OS, actually often MI9X. It operates independently of your main CPU and OS.
And its main purpose is remote management.
Primarily, yes. Intel Active Management Technology, or AMT, allows IT departments to manage corporate PCs remotely, power cycling, diagnostics, inventory, even if the OS is crashed.
And it stays on as long as there's power to the motherboard.
Correct. Even in sleep states. Intel claims it's needed for full CPU performance, too. It has deep hardware access network, memory, display.
Operating at a really low level, like Ring Native 3. That sounds powerful.
Extremely powerful. And that's where the security concerns come in. It's largely proprietary, the code isn't open for public audit, and vulnerabilities have been found.
Like that AMT vulnerability where passwords could be bypassed.
Exactly. Because it has network access and runs below the OS, if it's compromised, it could be a persistent backdoor that's very hard to detect or remove.
Can you, like, turn it off?
Not easily or completely. Disabling AMT in the UEFI settings only limits some functions. It doesn't shut down the ME itself. There are projects like MetCleaner that try to strip down its firmware, but it's risky and experimental. Some vendors like Tourism and System 76 work on minimizing its impact.
Okay, so what about AMD's version, the PSP?
The Platform Security Processor, or AMD Secure Technology, it arrived around 2013. It's also an independent processor, an ARM core actually, focused on establishing a secure environment.
So, similar idea, but maybe different focus. Security rather than remote management.
Generally, yes. Its jobs include managing the secure boot process, handling cryptographic keys, memory encryption features, and providing trusted platform module (TPM) services. It's crucial for the initial boot stages, even initializing system memory.
Does it have the same level of, say, network access as Intel ME?
That's debated. Some researchers believe it doesn't have its own direct network stack like ME's AMT, which might make it slightly less concerning from a remote access perspective. But
But it's still proprietary.
still proprietary, still limited documentation, still potential vulnerabilities, concerns about it being a black box with deep system access remain.
And disabling it. Also not really an option.
Generally not recommended or feasible. It's too tightly integrated into the CPU startup and security functions. BIOS options might limit its interaction with the OS, but they don't turn off the PSP itself. Older AMD CPUs, like the FX series, don't have it though.
Right. So wrapping this up, it's clear that just powering on your computer involves this incredibly complex dance between hardware and software.
From those initial boot instructions, through sophisticated firmware like UEFI with features like Secure Boot, all the way down to these embedded processors like ME and PSP.
And while things like UEFI bring speed and better security, these hidden systems, the ME and PSP, their proprietary nature and deep access definitely raise valid questions. Questions about transparency, about control.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? Considering the level of access these embedded systems have, systems you can't fully inspect or control, what does true ownership and security of your own computer actually mean today? Something to ponder next time you reach for that power button.